Hey everyone! Today we're exploring another chilling and disturbing case. If you'd like to support the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay engaged. It really means a lot. I truly appreciate it. Now, take a deep breath and let's dive in. In Los Angeles, behind every white picket fence, there's a story. Some are of love, some of success, and some of secrets too dark to imagine. This is a story of Meera, a housewife who traded in loyalty for lust, and a family that would never be the same again. On the surface, Meera lived a dream. A devoted husband, Arjun, 2 children, a comfortable home. She was seen by neighbors as graceful, polite, the very image of a loving wife and mother. But inside, she was restless. She wanted more excitement, more passion, more control over her own life. And then there was Rohan, 21 years old, the neighbor's son, young, impressionable, and drawn to Meera's charm. What began as casual conversations turned into stolen touches. Soon, they were meeting in secret, in cars, in hidden corners, and even in her home when her family was away. The affair was electric and dangerously addictive, but forbidden love wasn't enough. Meera wanted more than just an affair. She wanted freedom. And with Arjun's growing suspicions, her double life was on the brink of collapse. There was one obstacle standing between her and the life she dreamed with Rohan, her husband, and behind that obstacle, a life insurance policy worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Enough money to start over, enough money to kill for. One late evening, neighbors reported hearing a loud crash, a scream, then silence. Hours later, police would find a scene that didn't add up to a burglary, but something far more sinister. And all the evidence pointed back to one person no one suspected, Meera. But how did a devoted mother manipulate a boy young enough to be her son into carrying out her darkest desires? And what really happened inside that house on the night Arjun never walked out alive? When Arjun's body was discovered in his own living room, detectives knew something wasn't right. The scene was staged, drawers pulled out, items scattered, but nothing of real value was missing. This wasn't a robbery. This was personal. Meera played the role of the grieving wife. She cried in front of cameras, hugged her children, and told detectives she had no idea who could have wanted her husband dead. But behind her tears, investigators sensed a mask. And when they started combing through her phone records, the mask began to crack. A series of text messages revealed a love affair with the neighbor's son, Rohan. But the texts weren't just romantic, they were chilling. Hidden among sweet words were messages plotting freedom, whispers of when he's gone, and even discussions about how to make Arjun's death look like an accident. Detectives brought Rohan in for questioning. At first, he insisted he had nothing to do with it, but hours into the interrogation, the young man's composure shattered. He admitted that Meera had filled his head with promises, that she loved him, that they'd start a new life together, that the only thing stopping them was Arjun. And then, the words that sealed his fate. She told me if I really loved her, I'd do it. Rohan confessed to bludgeoning Arjun with a blunt object, while Meera allegedly stood by, whispering encouragement. Afterwards, she coached him on how to stage the crime scene, wiping down fingerprints and scattering drawers to create the illusion of a break-in gone wrong. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. When Meera was arrested, she didn't break down for Rohan. She didn't confess out of guilt. Instead, she denied everything and blamed him. She painted herself as a victim, claiming the young man became obsessed with her and killed her husband in a jealous rage. The woman Rohan believed would leave everything for him, abandoned him the moment she was caught. With 2 lives on trial, prosecutors had to untangle a toxic web of lust, manipulation, and betrayal. Was Meera the mastermind who seduced a vulnerable boy into murder? Or was Rohan telling the truth when he claimed she was the one pulling the strings? The trial of Meera and Rohan was unlike anything the Los Angeles courtroom had seen in years. On one side sat a grieving father, murdered in his own home. On the other, a 39-year-old wife accused of orchestrating his death, and a 21-year-old neighbor's son, who admitted to carrying it out. What unfolded inside that courtroom was a tale of betrayal, obsession, and manipulation played out under the watchful eyes of the law. The prosecution painted Meera as a cold, calculating mastermind. They presented the text messages, conversations dripping with lust and greed, where Meera allegedly promised Rowan love, freedom, and a life together if he killed her husband. The jury read words like, "When he's gone, it will just be us, and no turning back now." Messages prosecutors claimed were the blueprint for murder. Meera's defense told a very different story. They portrayed her as a lonely, vulnerable woman trapped in an unhappy marriage. They claimed Rohan, the much younger man, became dangerously obsessed with her, that he killed Arjun out of jealousy, and then tried to drag her name down with him. It was a battle of words. Was Meera a victim of Rowan's obsession, or was Rowan a puppet tangled in her strings? But then, the bombshell. The prosecution revealed a chilling piece of evidence. Life insurance documents. Just weeks before the murder, Meera had inquired about increasing Arjun's coverage. To the jury, it was a final puzzle piece. Love wasn't the only motive. Greed was just as powerful. After weeks of testimony, tears, and shocking revelations, the jury finally delivered its verdict. Rohan, guilty of second-degree murder. A young man who threw away his future, sentenced a decade behind bars. And Meera, guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. A life sentence without the possibility of parole. Once a respected wife and mother, now condemned to spend the rest of her life in a cell. In the end, 2 families were destroyed. A husband and father, gone forever. A son, manipulated into becoming a killer. And a mother who exchanged love and loyalty for lust and greed. What began as a secret affair spiraled into betrayal, bloodshed, and a courtroom tragedy that shocked an entire community. The trial was over. Justice, some said, had been served. But in the quiet streets of that Los Angeles neighborhood, the echoes of betrayal and bloodshed never truly faded. The verdict brought closure, but not healing. Arjun's 2 children were left fatherless. Their mother, now branded a murderer, taken away in handcuffs. In one night, they lost both parents. The innocence of childhood was replaced with whispers at school, trauma counseling, and questions that could never be answered. Why did Mom do this? For the neighbors, the story cut deep. Rohan wasn't just a name in the headlines. He was the boy next door, the kid they watched grow up. Now, he was serving decades in prison for a crime that shocked even his own parents. Some neighbors refused to speak his name again. Others struggled to understand how a bright young man was pulled into a married woman's deadly web. The Indian American community in L.A. was shaken. For many, the scandal wasn't just about murder, it was about shame. A respected family destroyed by lies and lust. Rumors spread in temples. Whispers filled dinner tables. Meera had not only betrayed her husband, she had betrayed her culture, her family's honor, and her community's trust. But behind the gossip and grief, one question still lingered. How did Meera, a mother and wife, descend into such darkness? Was she simply a woman desperate for love? Or was there something deeper, a manipulative personality, a hidden disorder, a darkness no one had seen until it was too late? Behind the walls of a California women's prison sits Meera, once a wife, a mother, and a neighbor, now branded a murderer, serving life without parole. But who is she really? A desperate woman blinded by love, or a calculating manipulator who hid her true self until it was too late? To answer that, we have to go deeper into her mind, her past, and her darkest secrets. Psychologists often say, crime doesn't begin the night of the murder. It begins long before. Meera's childhood in India was marked by strict traditions, high expectations, and a family that valued appearances above emotions. Interviews with relatives described her as charming but distant, always calculating, always watching. Even as a girl, she seemed to live a double life. Obedient daughter on the outside, restless and secretive on the inside. Her arranged marriage to Arjun brought stability, but not fulfillment. Friends recalled how she often complained of loneliness. She wanted passion, control, and admiration. When she met Rohan, the neighbor's son, psychologists believe she saw more than just a lover. She saw a tool, a way to rewrite her story. And in her mind, eliminating her husband was not murder. It was freedom. Prison psychologists noted Meera's alarming traits. A lack of remorse. A tendency to shift blame. The ability to charm, even behind bars. She spoke of the murder as if it were something that simply happened to her, rather than something she helped orchestrate. Her words painted Rohan as unstable, her marriage as unbearable, and herself as the victim. But her flat effect, the coldness in her tone, told a very different story. In one prison interview, when asked if she regretted what happened, Meera smiled faintly and said, "Regret doesn't change anything. People will believe what they want to believe." To the guards, she was polite. To fellow inmates, she was manipulative. And to the psychologist studying her, she was a textbook example of a narcissistic predator, someone who used love, lust, and lies to get exactly what she wanted. But still, questions remain. Did Meera truly mastermind everything? Or did her relationship with Rohan unleash a side of her that had always been buried? Was she born manipulative, or was she shaped by years of repression and cultural pressure? And just when investigators thought they knew the full story, a shocking letter written by Meera from prison would surface. A letter that hinted at secrets even darker than the murder itself. In prison, silence can be deafening. But sometimes, silence is broken by words that should have never been written. Months after her conviction, a handwritten letter from Meera surfaced. Smuggled out of prison, addressed to someone she once called her true love. And inside that letter were secrets that threatened to unravel everything we thought we knew about the case. The letter was intercepted by prison staff during a routine mail check. At first, it seemed like a love note, but investigators quickly realized it was much more. In it, Meera spoke not of guilt or sorrow, but of unfinished business. She wrote of betrayal, of enemies who would pay, and even hinted at a plan that could not be stopped. Shockingly, the letter was addressed to Rohan, the very man she had convinced to kill her husband. Despite blaming him in court, despite watching him sentenced to decades in prison, Meera still wrote to him. Some lines seemed almost taunting. They think they know the truth, but only you and I do. You were weak when you confessed, but I can make this right. Was this an attempt to reel Rohan back under her control? Or was she manipulating him yet again from behind bars? Experts analyzing the letter noticed strange patterns. Phrases repeated, numbers embedded within sentences, almost as if Meera were sending coded instructions. Authorities feared she might be reaching beyond prison walls, trying to influence people on the outside. Was she planning revenge? A new scheme? Or just playing another psychological game? Psychologists studying the letter argued it revealed her true nature. She wasn't haunted by what she'd done. She was still in control, still pulling strings, still feeding on manipulation. For Meera, prison wasn't the end. It was just a new stage, and the people around her were her pawns. Prison officials increased surveillance. Family members of Arjun demanded protection, fearing Meera might still have influence outside. Rohan, in a separate facility, reportedly broke down when told about the letter, saying she would never let him go. The case that once seemed closed was now open again, with new fears and new questions. But who else was Meera writing to? Investigators would soon discover she had more than one secret letter. Letters that hinted at a second affair, another possible accomplice, and a chilling suggestion that Arjun might not have been her only target. One letter was disturbing enough, but what investigators uncovered next changed everything. Hidden in the prison's mail logs were not one, not two, but several letters, all written by Meera, all sent to different people. And each one painted a darker, more twisted picture of the woman the world thought they already knew. One letter was addressed to an old family friend, a man who had known the couple for years. In it, Meera hinted that Arjun wasn't the only one she despised. She spoke of people who had humiliated her back in India, of relatives who would one day get what they deserve. It wasn't grief. It wasn't regret. It was a hit list in the making. Another letter was found addressed to a man she had never met before, an inmate in another California facility. The tone was flirtatious, manipulative, even romantic. She wrote about trusting no one but him, and hinted at promises of loyalty and love if he could help her on the outside. Was Meera building new pawns in her game, using prison walls not as barriers, but as hunting grounds? But the most shocking discovery was a third letter to a man in her own community, someone married, someone respected. The words were eerily similar to ways she had once lured Rohan. Sweet nothings mixed with dangerous undertones, slowly weaving a net of control. This wasn't just about one affair gone wrong. This was a pattern, a way of life. Experts who studied the letters compared Meera to cult leaders, individuals who thrive on manipulation, drawing people into a web of loyalty and obsession. Even from behind bars, she seemed to crave the same thing she always had: control. And disturbingly, she was finding ways to get it. When news of the letters leaked, the community was stunned all over again. To them, Meera wasn't just a murderer anymore. She was a predator of the heart, a woman who turned love into a weapon and left destruction wherever she went. And now, the question haunting everyone was simple. If she could manipulate so many from behind bars, what else was she capable of? And then came discovery that no one expected. A hidden journal found in her prison cell. A journal that detailed fantasies, violent plans, and a confession darker than the crime she was convicted for. A locked drawer, a torn mattress seam, and inside a journal. Not just any journal, but the private writings of Meera, the housewife turned murderer. What investigators found within its pages revealed a mind more disturbing than they had ever imagined. During a routine cell search, officers uncovered a battered notebook hidden under Meera's bed. At first glance, it seemed harmless. Daily entries, poems, thoughts. But as investigators flipped through the pages, the words became darker, obsessive, violent, and deeply unsettling. Page after page described fantasies of control and power. Meera wrote about seducing men, guards, inmates, even strangers, and bending them to her will. In one passage, she chillingly detailed how easy it was to make men do anything if you give them what they want. But then, the fantasies turned violent. She described vivid scenes of strangling, poisoning, and even watching her victims beg for mercy. Some entries read like step-by-step plans, cold calculated, terrifying. Midway through the journal, investigators found a passage that shook them. Arjun was not the first man I wanted gone. He was just the one I succeeded with. Was this just a manipulative flourish? Or a chilling clue that her murderous intentions stretched back years? Perhaps even before Los Angeles? Psychologists who examined the journal concluded it revealed a textbook case of psychopathy. No empathy. No remorse. Only obsession with power, lust, and domination. The journal wasn't just Meera's thoughts. It was her manifesto. Proof that she wasn't driven only by passion or greed, but by a darker hunger for control itself. Prison officials placed Meera under stricter monitoring. Inmates were warned not to interact with her unsupervised. But even under lockdown, whispers spread that Meera was still writing, still plotting, still finding ways to manipulate those who cross her path. And then came the final revelation. Tucked inside the back cover of the journal was a folded piece of paper, a list of names. Names of people on the outside. Names investigators believe were her next intended victims. In the back of Meera's prison journal lay one final secret. A piece of paper folded tightly, hidden away. And when investigators opened it, they found a list of names. Names that would send shockwaves far beyond prison walls. At the top of the list were people close to her. Arjun's relatives, a former friend she once accused of betrayal, and even her own sister back in India. But further down, there were names no one expected. A neighbor who testified against her, a community leader who had spoken about her trial, and disturbingly one of her own children's teachers. Authorities scrambled to notify those listed. Families were shaken, terrified that Meera might still have influence outside the prison walls. Police reviewed calls, mail, and visitors connected to her. The possibility that she had been plotting violence, even from behind bars, became impossible to ignore. Was the list just another manipulation? A fantasy scribbled down to feed her ego? Or was it a genuine blueprint of her next targets? Investigators never fully confirmed whether Meera had accomplices willing to act on her behalf, but the fear was enough to leave a permanent scar on those named. In the end, Meera's story was not just about one affair, one betrayal, or one murder. It was about a pattern of control, of obsession, of using love as a weapon and people as pawns. Her husband was dead. Her young lover was imprisoned. Her children were broken. And even from behind bars, Her shadow loomed large, a reminder that evil doesn't always end with conviction. Some killers take lives, others take souls. Meera did both, and though her story ends here, one question will always linger. How many lives would she have destroyed if she hadn't been caught? The story of Meera ends in prison, but the scars she left will last forever. What are your thoughts on this case? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay updated with more stories, where each case isn't just about crime, but also offers a lesson for life.